Thanks again, everybody, for joining. This is our weekly Kafka live stream. We are Lenses.io, doing this 30-minute live stream every week to talk about tips and tricks when working with Apache Kafka, as well as trends we're seeing in the market and what we're building over here. Special topic today, we're announcing GCS backup and restore using our compatible source and sync connectors for Google Cloud Storage. As always, I'm your host, Adam Noonan, and today I'm joined by one of our developers, David Sloan. So thanks so much for joining, David, and thanks our audience for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Perfect. And if you're asking who are you, we are Lenses.io. We are building the ideal developer experience for your multi-Kafka, multi-cloud environment. That's an intuitive user interface for working with Apache Kafka and event-driven architectures. And we're also the largest developer of open source connectors on the market for Apache Kafka. This week we've been in London at the Kafka Summit hosted by Confluent. We actually learned that CERN is using our open source. So definitely try out Lenses. We have a Docker image that you can run locally. It's a great local development environment. More on that later. But today we'll be talking mostly about our new GCS source connector. Again, largest contributor to the Apache 2 Kafka connectors on the market today. Those are available at our GitHub repo, Stream Reactor, almost hitting 1,000 stars on GitHub. So if you're using the connectors, definitely go to that repo, give us just a few more stars, and we'll hit that 1,000 mark. Joined with our developer experience and our open source connectors, we also offer enterprise support for those connectors. So if you're running a production pipeline and you need something like a 15-minute SLA, or you've got a feature request that you'd like advanced and some priority there, definitely let us know. And it's the combination of developer experience along with the enterprise support that will unlock special features within our platform. So today, if you have enterprise support for our S3 connector as well as a Lenses license, you are able to do a one-click deployment of an S3 backup or restore connector. So since we have that topic configuration there in Lenses, you can select the topic, just put in your S3 bucket information. We'll deploy that S3 backup, and you'll start syncing data into that S3 bucket. And then once it's in S3, it's available to restore either to that same Kafka cluster or a secondary Kafka cluster as well. So we have customers using this for an active passive configuration, replicating data to another Kafka topic, or just storing that historic event log in S3 there. And today we're proud to announce that we are releasing the GCS Source Connector 2. You can see here a timeline of how we've been working with Object Store Kafka connectors. All the way back in August 2020, we released the S3 Sync, followed by the S3 Source in October. Complementary connectors using very similar configurations, which enable us to do that backup and restore full cycle of Kafka data into S3. And now with the GCS source in GA, we have that same development lifecycle and implementation for Google Cloud Storage as well. And so what does this mean? This means that we now have backup and restore capabilities to Google Cloud Storage as well as S3. Awesome. And yep, you can see here the new Google Cloud Storage source connector. Fully open source, Apache 2, so you're welcome to use the connector even if you aren't a customer. Again, we'll receive questions and comments in our Slack community by people using the connectors. Then we do offer enterprise support on our connectors as well, with the enhanced experience through the Lenses user interface, everything being backed by the API there too. And some use cases for these source and sync connectors, especially when you're working with Object Store, we're noticing that's a Swiss Army knife of data integration at this point. Developers love having all of their data right there in an easily accessible Object Store, highly flexible, so they can store all sites of file formats and types of data there. And now with GCS Source and Sync, you're able to utilize native Google Cloud services and infrastructure running in GCS. And you can work with real-time Kafka data without developing an application that is Kafka aware. So you can just consume directly from that object store in GCS. Again, we see customers using this for disaster recovery use cases, but as well as historical analysis, understanding what's been happening at their Kafka temporary event log for a long time. So quick analytics on actual Kafka real-time data. So super cool integration there, and hopefully fueling some awesome new AI machine learning use cases too that we keep hearing about. And if you're not familiar, the way Kafka Connect works is we have source connectors that can read from an external source system and write to Kafka Connect. That'll stream data, which means a variety of consumers can then use that data for their own use cases without interacting or affecting others. And that producer source connector doesn't need to be aware of where that data is going and managing that point-to-point connection. Since you've got Kafka, your distributed event log in the middle. And then you can even deploy sync connectors too, which will then take that real-time data and write it to an external source system. So you can see here now that we have the GCS source and sync, we can go full cycle into Google Cloud Storage with real-time data. And with that, I'll hand it over to David, who's going to walk us through some of the features he's been helping develop for the GCS source connector. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Adam. So yeah, in terms of our features, we're supporting all the authentication modes that the Google library provides us. So we've got the credentials, we've got the default authentication, which means that we can read the authentication details from the environment variables. We can read them from your CLI credentials, and we can read them from the service account if you're running it on a GCP instance. We can read it from the metadata server. And also, if you're more comfortable putting a file on your worker node, then we can read the credentials from a file as well. Next slide, please. We are fully integrated with the secret provider. This works for any Kafka Connect connector. So if we wanted to, you could implement the secret provider with the Vault, with HashiCorp Vault as an example, with AWS Secrets Manager. Azure has a secret vault, and you can also do environment variables, etc., to store your secrets. The reason you might not want to expose your secrets inside the Kafka configuration, it might be because you're working with some contractors who you'd rather they didn't have full access to your systems, etc. So this just gives you an extra level of security, so you're not exposing your secrets. Next slide, please.
Yep. And for more information on why you might want to use an external secrets provider, definitely check out our previous live stream on that subject as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Our connectors are the only ones that have KCQL support. So this gives you the ability to configure data mappings, formats, and also batching. And it's a powerful configuration tool. And one of the biggest benefits is that you can support multiple mappings. So you can have a single connector instance, and it can support multiple mappings from or to different sources, from a source topic to a different source bucket, etc. In terms of the format support in our source connector for GCS, we've got all the usual suspects here. We've got JSON, Avro, Parquet format, text format. We can have CSV format with or without headers, and there's also the bytes format. And more recently, we've had the implementation of the envelope format, which enables you to store your key, your value, and your headers all in a handy Avro envelope. And there are various compressions available, including Snappy, gzip, Parquet, and that is within Parquet and Avro. And also now available is the gzip format for JSON, which one of our contributors contributed to the project, which is actually a really wonderful thing. Okay. So I mentioned the envelope support. So this is something that enables you to store all your metadata along with the message, so the headers, the key, and the value in an Avro envelope on GCP. And here's an example of the envelope configuration. So you can see here, we have this simple notion of properties, store.envelope equals true, and that activates the envelope. So if you've written the files using the GCS sync, then the source will be able to read those files if you configure it the same with the envelope. So here's an example. here's an example I'm going to demo. So I'm going to demo the round trip from the sync. So I'm going to write out the files onto GCS using the sync. And here's this configuration for the sync. So you can see we've got the topic specified. So I'm going to write the information from this topic, NYC yellow taxi trip data, and I'm going to write it out into the stream reactor testing. This is the name of the bucket on GCP, and the prefix on GCP is called my first GCP sync simple demo. So I'm going to write the files from yellow taxi trip data into this key, into this directory on GCP. And I'm going to store it as Avro. And for authentication, I'm going to use a JSON file, which contains the authentication credentials that I configured on my Connect worker. Okay, so yeah, that's a fairly simple configuration for the GCP sync. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you the source configuration, which is actually very similar. So you can see I've given it a name, March source using file. I can't believe it's March already. And so you give it the connector class name, the GCP storage source connector. And I'm going to write the data. So when I configure my source, so imagine I've written all my files out to my GCP bucket using the sync, and I'm going to read them back in, and I'm going to write them into a new topic called NYC yellow taxi trip data copied. So you can see my configuration again. It's just the other way around from what the sync was doing. So I'm writing into yellow taxi trip data copied from my first GCP sync simple demo directory. And again, you can see my authentication credentials, and I've set up a recurse levels, which just means the level of nesting that I have in my GCP bucket so that we can discover the partitions effectively. Okay. There is an option to do partition extraction. I'm not going to demo this today, but it's fairly simple. If you use a standard format, you can specify the hierarchical partition extraction. Alternatively, if you're doing something custom, you can specify a regular expression. So this allows us to pull out the number of the Kafka partition that the messages were sourced from, so that we can put them back into that exact partition if we wanted to. Okay.
All right. And with that, you ready to demo
Should we
the
try the
full?
next slide?
Yes. The next slide was demo time.
Oh, yes, okay.
So if you're
And
ready, David.
yeah, sure. Do you want to mention Lenses Box?
I think we'll cover it at the end, and I
Great.
briefly mentioned before, but definitely go to lensesio/start.io/start and download our all-in-one Docker container while David is firing it up. It comes packaged with a single Kafka broker, Kafka Connect, schema registry, I believe Elastic as well, and our famous Lenses user interface along with API and CLI there. So great local development environment, can produce data to it. It comes packaged with some mock data producers. Fantastic way to test your applications and get started with event-driven architecture.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. So first of all, I'm going to show you the bucket that I've set up, and it's called Stream Reactor Testing. Just going to make sure I refresh, just so that I can show you that it's totally empty. And then I'm going to head on to Lenses Box. So very handy being able to run this locally. And I'm going to just demonstrate the taxi trip data for you and show you what that data looks like. I think Lenses Box is still loading at the moment, so I'm just going to give it another moment, and then I'll go back into this. But I'm going to just get my configuration ready. So this is just the same as the configuration that I already showed you. I've added a bit of error handling to it as I was struggling earlier with my internet connection. Hopefully that will be resolved now. So let's take another look at this data. And yeah, sure enough, it looks a bit better this time. now that it's finished loading. So you can see that I've got details about New York City taxis, and this is one of the sets of test data that comes with Lenses box. So you can see all the information there. And what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to write this out to GCP into a bucket, and I'm going to read it back in using the source. So I'm going to write it out using the sink, read it back in using the source. So I've shown you the bucket, and now we're going to create the connector using the Lenses UI. So I'm going to create the new connector. So to start with, I'm going to use a sink, and I'm going to use our new GCP storage connector, our GCS connector, and I'm going to paste in my configuration. Now, Lenses gives you a bit of help with the configuration, but I've prepared this one earlier.
David, could you share your full screen too? So we can take a good look at that. If you
Sorry,
could expand the window that for Lenses box. Nice.
sorry, there you go. Yep, perfect. So there you can see the configuration that I prepared earlier. I'm going to just click create, and this is just what you've already seen on the slide. So you can see we're reading from New York City taxi trip data, we're storing it as Avro, and yeah, that's it. So I'm going to create it. It's going to start reading from my topic, and hopefully it will start writing it out into GCP. So I'm just going to take a look at the connector. It's running, it's healthy, green healthy. So I'm going to just wait until we start seeing files on GCP. Going to keep clicking refresh. There, sure enough, we've got some files already. So you can see we've written an indexes directory, and we've written the data itself, and this is the path that we gave it. So you got my simple demo, my NYC yellow taxi trip data, and then underneath this level we have the partitions. So there we go. It's still streaming the data. And then inside here we have our Avro files that are being written from the data on that taxi topic. Okay, so next up, I am going to go onto Lenses, and I'm going to go into the Explore screen, and I'm going to create a new topic. And I'm going to call this one New York City taxi trip data copied, so that I can demonstrate the full circle and bring the data back in to Kafka. So I'm going to create that topic. I'm going to create 5 partitions so it mirrors the original topic, which also had 5 partitions. Right, and next up, I am going to create the connector. So along with March sync using file, we're now going to have the March source using file. And I'm going to create my connector the same way as before. This time we're going to create a source. And we have our GCP storage connector, fresh off the development pipeline. And again, the properties are similar. I've already explained these on the slide, but I'll just go over it again. So we're writing out to the topic, New York City yellow taxi trip data copied. We're inserting into that topic, selecting everything from the simple demo, storing as Avro. So let's see what happens. And it's running. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back into the Explore screen, and I'm going to take a look at our new topic. And I'm going to refresh this a few times. And you can see already we've got 6,202 records out of the 6,705. It's worth noting that these test topics have data streaming into them all the time. So it might nearly catch up or it might catch up, but it's always going to be streaming. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at this topic and let's see what the data looks like. And yeah, there it is. This is the same data we saw earlier, the same format, and roughly the same number. As it's still streaming, it will eventually catch up. There you go. Adam, can I hand back to you?
Yeah, great job, David. Thank you so much for helping out with the connector and killing that demo. Great job. So now you're streaming data in your Kafka topic. You're also streaming it into your Google Cloud storage bucket. It's ready for analysis there, for fueling any sort of machine learning recommendation, cool use cases you can use with native Google Cloud services. We'll jump back into the slide deck and finish up. Again, so that connector is now in GA. Feel free to download it, install the jar, deploy it on your Kafka Connect cluster, full cycle from Kafka to GCS, back to Kafka again, either that same cluster, or feel free to deploy that source connector to a secondary cluster, again, closing that loop from Kafka to GCS, just like we have with AWS S3, and soon to come Azure Data Lake Storage as well. So many more connectors are available in the Stream Reactor repo. Definitely give it a look on GitHub, and hopefully a star too, hoping to push past that 1,000 point sometime soon. With the 20 plus that we have available, there's a lot more on the way. And at Kafka Summit, we had a voting page where people could vote on what they're expecting. Two of the most requested connectors that we have in the pipeline would be Apache Iceberg and the Kafka to Kafka replicator. So if you see any of these connectors that you're particularly interested, definitely let us know. You can contact us on our Slack channel and interface with the wider team there. David ran that entire demo from our Lenses box instance. Again, Docker, local Docker image that you can use to develop Apache Kafka and event-driven applications, deploy connectors, and even stream processing using SQL syntax. With that, you get Kafka, Zookeeper, Kafka Connect, Elasticsearch, and Schema Registry. So everything you need to do to develop an event-driven application. Of course, since it's Lens as well, that comes with governance controls, our API and CLI integration, which makes it a cool Lego building block for working with Kafka automations. And then you also get the SQL Studio for SQL exploration of Kafka data, and again, SQL processors for transformation. That New York taxi, yellow taxi trip data is one of our mock data producers too. So once you fire up that Lenses box, you'll have access to that full data set. And you can get that Lenses box instance by going to lenses.io/start and selecting the all-in-one Kafka Docker image. Again, if you saw any of those connectors that look particularly interesting, or you're working with any of our connectors right now, definitely give us a shout out on our Slack community. You can interface with the whole team there, ask us any questions, and get product updates and be informed of live streams such as this one and any public hands-on workshops that we happen to be running. And that's been our 30 minutes Kafka live stream. Thanks again so much, David, for helping present. Absolutely demolished that demo. Fantastic job. Definitely tune in next week where we'll be covering the Azure Event Hub's Source and Sync connector. And with that, thank you all so much. If you ran into me at the Kafka Summit conference, it was great speaking with you. And if not, we'll see you at the next one.